The Islamic Republic of Iran makes no effort to conceal its desire to wipe Israel off the map. Just this week, leaders called for the elimination of two major Israeli cities, Tel Aviv and Haifa. The regime in Iran deploys a wide range of tools and proxies to achieve this end. The result has been a series of low-level conflagrations over the course of the last several weeks, with Iranian proxies routinely attacking Israel both inside and just beyond its borders. In Lebanon, Iran-backed Hezbollah fired more than 40 rockets at Israel. In Syria, the Iranian regime has deployed Shiite militias and military installations that Israel strikes with regularity. In the West Bank, long-standing terror groups, and now some new ones, continue to attack Israel. The Palestinian Authority has essentially lost control, making the West Bank even more lawless and dangerous. Iran seeks to exploit this chaos. In Gaza, the Hamas terrorist group routinely fires salvos of rockets into Israel, including about 36 very recently. All of this has been happening during the holy month of Ramadan, a period in which every year Iran has worked to stoke tensions and incite violence. This year has been no exception, with rioters at the Temple Mount throwing rocks and shooting fireworks at police. Little fires everywhere. That's what the Israeli Defense Forces saw this month, and from all appearances the IDF snuffed all of them out. But there are no permanent victories in the Middle East, only permanent battles. I'm Jonathan Schanzer, Senior Vice President for Research, filling in for host Cliff May, and I'm excited to be joined by Brigadier General Jacob Nagel. He's the former acting Israeli National Security Advisor under Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He's also a senior fellow here at FDD, and he's a good friend. We're pleased to welcome you to another installment of FDD's podcast. This is Foreign Policy.
Jacob, welcome back to the studio.
Thank you very much. I always love to be here.
We enjoy having you. I want to talk to you this week about a very, I think, interesting period of time that Israel has just gone through. There are a lot of people who are talking about the political reforms and the debates inside Israel. I don't want to talk about that today.
Very good.
Okay. What I do want to talk about, though, is what didn't happen. There was, by many accounts, a possible war that could have broken out. There were multiple fronts surrounding Israel that turned hot. Lebanon, Syria, Gaza, Jerusalem, West Bank. All of them turned hot within a few days, and then all of them turned cool again. Behind all of it, of course, we know, is one actor, the Islamic Republic of Iran. We know that Iran has a plan to destroy Israel. So let's talk for a minute about what Iran wants to do, and then from there, let's talk about each one of the fronts. So let me start with Iran. What is Iran's ultimate goal here as it eyes Israel and it looks for ways to destabilize it?
First of all, I agree with most of the things that you just raised. I didn't belong to the group that thought that there is a war on our front. There was big tension. There was a potential war, but I didn't think it's going to deteriorate to war. I don't think even Iran wanted it to be deteriorating to war. Now, they wanted Israel to be pushed and conflagrated in the more than 5 fronts that you mentioned. I can add to it the economic one, ICC, Iraq, Yemen. They want us to be busy. They want Israel to be weak. They are clapping hands when they hear some irresponsible Israelis saying that Israel is collapsing or Israel is killing itself. Why? Iran wants Israel to be dismissed, not existing anymore. And in order to do it, they are building the proxies around us. They are building Hezbollah, Hamas, Syria. They want everyone around Israel, and the Iranian ultimate goal is to connect from Iran via Iraq, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, Israel, and then they will say what we are always saying as a joke, that the goal of our chief of the Navy and the goal of the supreme leader of Iran are the same. Both of them see the future of Israel in the sea.
Okay, so let me ask you this. If Iran does want to see Israel pushed into the sea, if that is in fact the goal, then why keep these conflicts at a low level? Why not go for a full attack with all of these different proxies and with all the different weapons that Iran has at its disposal? Why would it not carry out that final project that Iran has been thinking about for decades?
There is only one reason. They understand they cannot do it. Now, Iran is not weak, but is much weaker than it was before. The sanctions that they have because of the nuclear program, even so, Iran real went down substantially. Their economy is in a very bad shape. Still, they have very good industry, a very good defense industry. If they would think that they can do what we just mentioned, take all their proxies and maybe join them from Iran and make Israel disappear now, probably they would do it last week. They know that they cannot do it. Their goal now is to build their proxies. This is why one of the three red lines of Israel in the northern front is not giving any Iran establishment in Syria, because they want to make Syria like Lebanon. We did a mistake in Lebanon. And they have now 150,000 statistical missiles, and they want to build a huge arsenal of PGMs, precise guided munitions, in Lebanon. If Israel would not do what Israel did in the last 10, 12 years, Syria would be the same as Lebanon. We stopped it. So Iran is now building the forces. They know they cannot do it now. So they want to have this war on low level, low flames, running Israel to be disturbed, but not yet the war, because they know that Israel will retaliate against Iran.
Okay, so I think you've laid it out, but I guess my question, and I want to get to each one of these fronts in a minute, but what benefit does Iran get from antagonizing Israel with 40 rockets out of Gaza, 30 rockets out of Lebanon? Doesn't it seem like a risk if their ultimate goal is to bring these proxies together? In other words, what is to say that Israel wouldn't want to respond with overwhelming force to Lebanon or to Gaza? That will set back Iran again, would it not?
What Iran is doing, and unfortunately they are doing it smartly enough, they want, I don't want to say the war between war Iran style, but they want to keep Israel busy in these conflagrations against Gaza, against Lebanon, against Syria, and then maybe they think that Israel won't have enough time and resources and operations against Iran itself. They are doing it mistakenly, because if you follow what's going on in Iran, and again, someone call it the head of the lion, the head of the octopus, Israel decided to change its national security strategy and not only attack the attackers, but attack the country where the attackers come from and attack the senders. And the senders are Iran. So the only way for Iran to maybe make sure that Israel have less patience to do things in Iran is by making Israel busy with defending or attacking or doing things against Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, Jerusalem. It's exactly the Iranian ultimate goal and plan. Make Israel busy.
So let me ask you this. Understanding Israel's strategy of holding the countries responsible that dispatch these terrorist groups, let's turn to Lebanon. This past week, we saw something very interesting out of Lebanon, where rockets were fired for the first time. Well, we saw a couple in 2021. There have been moments of tension, but this was the largest salvo of rockets that we've seen probably since 2006. And instead of holding the government of Lebanon responsible, or even holding Hezbollah responsible for this attack, Israel blamed Hamas. Now, we know, of course, that Hamas has been building infrastructure. Israel has warned the UN about this since 2018. We know who the person is who's responsible for it. His name is Salah al-Aruri. But what's interesting is that Aruri is getting his weapons. He's getting all of the resources that he needs from Hezbollah and from Iran. And yet we did not see the Lebanese front explode. How did that happen?
I don't want to say that we should see the Lebanon front exploding, but I am totally agreeing with you, and I know that sometimes where you sit depends where you stand, or where you stand depends where you sit, meaning we from outside don't see all the reasons and all the operational pros and cons to do things or not doing things. But there is one thing that I cannot agree with. Of course, Iran was the total orchestrator, but it's Hezbollah. And by saying that it is Hamas, the Israeli, mainly IDF, are playing to the hands of our enemies. Because when you say it's Hamas, I can not retaliate against Hezbollah. Now, the reason that they are doing it, maybe if I was in their position, I would do the same. I don't think so. And I think that it's getting away from the problem. I think it's the opposite. the Hezbollah, they gave us the terrorists in Megiddo, and the salvo of missiles gave Israel the opportunity to retaliate against very good targets that we have in Lebanon. We could use some of those targets, and it was legitimate. We had the legitimacy to do it, and we didn't do it. It was a mistake.
So you're referencing, of course, the attack that took place in Megiddo, which is just north of the West Bank, north central Israel. This was an attack where a Lebanese citizen climbed over a fence, climbed over into Israeli territory, hitchhiked his way down to the south of Israel, and planted a bomb that killed an Arab-Israeli citizen.
Could be much worse.
It could have been a lot worse, correct? The IDF was able to neutralize the attacker before he was able to return to Lebanon. But I think it did rattle a number in Israel, a number of security officials. And of course, you're mentioning the PGMs, the precision-guided munitions. We understand now that Hezbollah has hundreds of these weapons. These weapons are very precise. They could hit very sensitive targets inside Israel. Do you think that the sheer number of PGMs that Hezbollah has in its possession, do you think that is, when you talk about the calculus of the IDF and the security cabinet inside Israel, do you think that it's concern over what that next war might look like, or waiting maybe for a better opportunity? I mean, you've been in that room. How does one understand what goes into that decision-making? Is it deterrence? Is it because the Israeli population would like more quiet rather than more war? Is it a combination of all of those things?
First of all, the decision is because of a combination, but I think it's a mistake. The decision was that the equation, Israel is not hitting Lebanon, only Syria, because via Syria, those PGMs are being transferred. While those PGMs are not being produced on the soil of Lebanon, we are not eating them. I don't know if it was a good decision or not, but this was the decision. But the equation changed on one side, and the other side is not changing it. So I think it's a mistake on one end. The decision, yes, it's a mixture of reasons, but the biggest one is, and I don't like it, people don't want the situation to escalate. I don't want the situation to escalate, but if you don't want the situation to escalate, and the other side knows that this is what you want, they are escalating it till the point they think that you can suffer. It's a problem. We should be the one that initiate the situation and the actions, and not the one that is reacting according to what the other side is doing. The other side should not expect what you are going to do. So sometimes I get 10 missiles, I will retaliate with 1. Sometimes I get 100, I will retaliate with 100. When I get 100, maybe I'll retaliate with 2. Meaning the other side cannot expect what you are going to do. What we have now in the northern front is that the other side thinks that it deterred us. It's also connected to the gas deal. Nasrallah thinks that it deterred Israel. It's a very bad situation. We should not be in this situation. We should be the leaders. This is why I think we had an opportunity to retaliate and we didn't do it.
Let's move to the West Bank, because this
Judea
is
and Samaria.
To Judea and Samaria, if you wish, the historical name of this territory. This is a front where Israel has been more aggressive, where there have been various terrorist groups, whether Hamas or Islamic Jihad or this new organization, the Lion's Den. We have seen a significant uptick in activity on the part of terrorist groups attacking Israeli citizens, attacking Israeli soldiers, and the IDF has responded. What do we know about this activity? Is it organic? There have been people who've been talking about a third intifada, a third uprising. Is that what's happening? How do we understand this through the lens of the Israeli security establishment?
Very, very good question. First of all, if you recall, I said no third intifada is coming. Like you said, it was very close to a war these last 2 weeks. People say a few months ago, we are very, very, very close to a third intifada. No, we are not. We are not close to the third intifada because they don't want it. But still, there are problems in this area. And yes, of course, in this area, the IDF and Israel retaliating much harder and better. Why? 2 reasons. First of all, this area is very close to the center of Israel. We cannot tolerate missiles, for example, coming from Jenin or Shechem or other places to Ben Gurion airport. But the main reason is because we are controlling this area. Remember what happened in Gaza, the disengagement, and what happened in Lebanon, our withdrawal from Lebanon. So in this area, in Judea and Samaria, we control the area. We have very good intelligence. We have the Shabak there. We have the IDF there. we can stop the bomb before the bomb goes up to Israel.
The response of Israel to some of these attacks or plans for attacks, it puts Israel sometimes in a difficult position. Part of it has to do with the fact that the Palestinian Authority either cannot operate in some of these towns, like Jenin, like Nablus, or Shechem, as you call it. There are a number of places now that have become no-go zones for the Palestinian Authority. We don't know if it's a question of ability or will, but it seems like it's putting Israel in a difficult position. If Israel goes in, well, then the local people are very mad and they may want to respond. If Israel doesn't go in, then we have significant security issues that Israel is deferring. So what is the right answer for Israel right now in the West Bank?
The right answer there in Judea and Samaria is very simple, and you can see it in the actions. And in this case, there is no right or left. The IDF is calling the shots, and he gets the full support from the government. Every time when we need to do something inside these areas, we are doing it. We are not asking questions. Special forces are going in, are arresting the people that are planning a terror attack or the people that just did a terror attack and they are hiding in those areas. On almost every terror attack that happened inside Israel for the last few years, at the end, sometimes it took 2 days, sometimes it took 2 weeks, sometimes it took 2 months. The IDF put its hands on the attackers. When it was from Gaza, or people are sending missiles, we cannot do it because we are not there. We are not controlling the area. So there is no question of what you said. When the IDF is deciding to go in, there is no question what will happen with the PA or with the local people. We are telling them, you don't want us to go in? Stop the terror attacks. Now, as you said, Jenin and Nablus, there are 2 places that the PA cannot even go in. Like there are places in East Jerusalem that the Israeli police is not going in. So there are areas that you should not let it deteriorate so you cannot control. In Judea and Samaria, Israel and the IDF are controlling. We have our forces in, and every time when we need to do things, preventing action or after action, we can do what we need. Sometimes it's very dangerous.
I think it is extremely dangerous. And I think there's obviously a lot of concern about the future of the West Bank, the future, what happens after Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen leaves
we call
the
it
scene.
the day after.
Yeah. What do you think the plan is for the day after?
Look, it's amazing. There are so many leaders in the Arab world that I'm hearing for more than 10 years that they have only 1 week to live. So it happened with late Assad, it happened with Mubarak, Khamenei, it's happened now with Abu Mazen. I was the NSA 7 years ago. I remember a lot of debates of what will happen the day after, and we thought maybe it's 2 months from now. And you know, people debated if Assad stay for 2 weeks, 2 months, or 6 months. Now, see how many years. And now Assad is starting traveling all over the world and coming back to the Arab League and everything. So we cannot control and anticipate and forecast what will happen in the PA. But most of the names that were there on the list on the time I did thinking of what will be the day after, they don't exist anymore. Some of them dead, some of them are in states, some of them are doing other things. Israel can withstand the day after. Of course, those that are responsible are doing their calculus. Who is going to be, but maybe you will remain for the next 20 years. Who knows? Maybe you and me will retire before he will retire.
Interestingly, in conversations that I've had in Israel, there's a sense now among those that watch the Palestinian file that the leadership that once wanted to succeed Mahmoud Abbas, that increasingly they look at the West Bank and they see it failing. They see the lack of control. And so there are fewer people that actually want the job. And this is obviously creating a different kind of a scenario, one that could lead to chaos, or as they say on Netflix, fauda. We'll have to watch very carefully. But of course, that is not made any easier, this scenario in the West Bank, by what's happening in Jerusalem. Now, Jerusalem, as we know, is a city that is holy to the 3 major monotheistic faiths. It has a great number of players in the Middle East and beyond that wish to have a hand in its control. But of course, only one country truly controls it, and that is Israel. And Israel has just gone through a very challenging month, the month of Ramadan. Maybe just tell our listeners a little bit about what has happened in Jerusalem over the last several weeks and what the right way forward for Israel should be. I know you've dealt with this question as the head of the National Security Council in Israel. I know that you've wrestled with this question before. So maybe give a little bit of a sense of what's just happened, but also what responsible leaders should be doing in this city.
I agree with you, but because you don't know who is the successor, sometimes someone young and maybe one that can change the equation, like MBS in Saudi, like Sadat in Egypt, will rise. I am not optimistic. I don't see someone like this. But as you said, all the old ones don't want to come. We don't see new ones. I don't know what will happen. If we go to Jerusalem, yes, as you said, I dealt with it a lot when I was NSA. This is the only place, I think, in the world that can inflame the Middle East, of course, but the whole region and maybe the whole world. There is only one place, Temple Mount, is in a very, very small area, very sacred to all religious. And I'm telling my people, I'm telling myself, I'm telling my government, everyone, act smart, don't be right. Sometimes I was talking to ministers when I was NSA. You can guess who is the minister. Telling them, don't go this week to Mount Temple. And he was listening to me because he said, he knows that when there is time, I will tell him, now you can go. There are areas that you don't have to be correct. Yes, sometimes Ramadan together with Passover. We have to be working together. Sometimes let the time walk a little bit. 5 weeks, 5 days, 5 minutes. We can talk a lot about Jerusalem, but in this area, I didn't think there will be a war, and there was no war. But it is still dangerous.
Yeah. This month, we've seen rioters on the Temple Mount throwing rocks, shooting fireworks at the police. Is the idea here that this is something that just happens because it's Ramadan every year? Who stands to benefit from this? Who is behind this activity, in your opinion?
Okay, again, we can say that Iran is behind everything, and I think Iran is, but in this case, it's not directly and 100% Iran. Because Iran have enough on the other front. Iran is backing their allies in also Jerusalem, but the Arab world, so-called the extremists, it can be Hamas that want the fire to be in Jerusalem, not in Gaza. It can be, of course, Nasrallah, and it can be Iran, and it can be others that they are very happy when those riots are in Jerusalem. When there was dangerous, when they endanger the Israeli prayers in the Western Wall, when they are throwing stones or we knew that they have even explosives inside the mosque, then the police act precise and they wanted to stop the dangerous from happening. The Prime Minister and the Cabinet also got a decision. I know people didn't like it, but the decision that on the last 10 days of Ramadan, Jewish are not going to the Mount Temple. I've been there. It's not a simple place. You have to be there in order to understand what is the mosque, what you can have inside, what you can hide inside, what can happen if things will go out of control. I think at the total, what the authorities did, police, the minister, the government, the prime minister, but at the end it was like playing in between the drops, and sometimes this is the action that you have to take.
Okay, so Israel handled itself, I think, as well as maybe it could have been expected.
And a war didn't come there. People say, oh, fire, it didn't happen.
Not yet.
It didn't happen. Yet. Yes. It's always dangerous there.
Always, 100%. I want to briefly touch on 2 other fronts before we turn to the broader region. Gaza, you mentioned Hamas and how Hamas has an interest in possibly spreading violence in the Gaza Strip, but also maybe more so in Jerusalem. This has been a more quiet front for the last 2 years in Gaza. Then we saw the recent salvo of rockets, about 36 of them fired. Did that mark a change in strategy for Hamas? I mean, one of the things that we've heard over the last few years is that Hamas is not interested in firing rockets anymore. They want to export their violence to the West Bank. They want to export it to Jerusalem. They want to keep Gaza quiet. Has that strategy changed for Hamas, or do you think it's still the same?
The strategy is very smart on their side, and it's composed on what you said, but not only. Their strategy is to keep Israel busy on one side, meaning export the problem to Jerusalem, to Judea, Samaria, even to Lebanon. They need time in order to strengthen themselves, to build more missiles, to build more tunnels. But they are building other things. Hamas in Gaza, they want also PGMs. There were even rumors that they want to build the PGMs also in Gaza. Of course, Israel, I'm sure, in this case, won't allow it. They are still building the city of tunnels below Gaza. I don't know if you know, but there are hundreds of kilometers of tunnels below Gaza. Not tunnels that go up to Israel, but tunnels that they think will help them when Israel will maybe sometimes go into Gaza. I'm not sure it will happen, but so they are trying to eat the cake and leave it full, meaning
Have their cake and eat it too.
Yes, translated from Hebrew. It's eat the cake and leave it all. What I'm saying is that they think that they can control what will happen in other fronts. So they are pushing them to do it. They are helping them. They are sending orders, materials, equipment directly or indirectly through the borders of other countries. And they think that Israel won't retaliate. But the most important message I want to say, they are deterred. Why they are deterred? Because they understand what will happen to Gaza and they don't want it to happen. And again, as I said before, Israel should not give them the luxury to dictate the pace. We have to decide when we retaliate and in what strengths.
The last front, Syria. It is an area where Israel operates on a regular basis, as you and I both know.
According to foreign press.
According to foreign press, it is the primary site of what the Israelis call the Mabam, or the campaign between wars. But there are other things that happen on that border as well, including Shiite militias that are loyal to Iran are operating there. There's all sorts of infrastructure that Israel must always watch and sometimes destroy. How did that front look over the last few weeks as tensions flared on Israel's many other borders?
In the Syrian border or the Syrian area, things happened, things changed during the last year. I think last time we talked, we had very good allies, so-called, in this area, defending the Israelis' three red lines. No terror organization on our borders, not game-changing weapons from Iran to Hezbollah via Syria, and not establishing Iranian militias and forces on Syria. The two, unfortunately, there was the Ukraine war, and the Russians took their forces out from Syria. The Russians are out, and the Iranians are supporting the Russians in Ukraine, violating human rights, killing women, children in riots in Iran and in Ukraine. So the Russians, they are not against Iran in Syria. And Assad understood the Russians are out. The only one that can defend him is now some Hezbollah, but mostly the Iranians. And Israel is still in the red line that the Iranians should be out. This is why this front have a potential to explode. They tried to do things against Israel. We retaliate very, very hard there. I think that this front have a potential to explode even further and much, much faster than other fronts, because in this front, Israel will not retaliate changes from its red lines. We will retaliate much harder than in any other front. One thing that bear in mind, some of what Iranians are doing now in Syria, using so-called humanitarian aid, hundreds of planes coming with spare parts, and they are trying to build a secondary or a main new air defense system to Syria to replace the Russian one. We are not going to allow it. Israel is not going to allow it.
Yeah, and we know that obviously Israel is operating there under the threshold of war, as we say, but one never knows when that threshold will change. So it's something to watch. I want to start to wrap up here, but I do want to ask you, after a very busy month of lots of little fires, as we might say, that Israel needed to put out all around its borders, I think it's fair to ask, is normalization still going well?
Normalization between who?
Between Israel and the Arab states.
Ah, okay. I know that this you meant, but I have reason to say what I said, but
okay, well, explain.
Look, normalization, everyone defines differently. It's like, you know, that sometimes democracy is depend on geography, and reasoning or logic is depending on who is talking about. The logic of US or Israel or Arab states are not the same. And democracy in US and Israel and in Arab states are not the same. Now, the normalization between Israel and the Gulf states, what we call the Abraham Accords, we didn't conquer yet the crown jewel of Saudi Arabia because of many reasons. And we see now the axis that is starting. It's a very dangerous one, but Iran and Saudi on the auspice of China and Russia, Syria, and it's very bad to the United States, but of course also for Israel. But I am not losing hope, because the Abraham Accords reasoning, the main reasoning was that they saw that the only one that can fight against Iran is Israel. And it didn't change. It even became stronger, because the United States, according to what President Biden say, they are not going to attack Iran. The Saudis are looking and say also Israel maybe is not doing it because they are hearing some irresponsible Israelis saying that Israel don't have the capabilities. They are totally wrong. And Israel is not going to attack. And of course, if there will be so-called bad agreement, under an agreement, Israel is not going to attack. So the Saudis, they are doing what is good for their interests. They are playing all over the field. So I'm optimistic that the normalization is there. Ask me if it will be enlarged. I'm not sure. It will take time. Maybe after the next elections in the United States, and I don't want to affect the elections. I'm not interfering in the U.S. Elections, but the Saudis are doing what they need for their interests.
Okay. I think I like that optimistic note. Let me ask you one final question. And that is, look, we just saw the deal that was made between the Chinese and the Saudis and the Iranians. Many people in this country were alarmed. First of all, we were surprised. I think many people were surprised by this, including in the Middle East. They didn't expect this agreement to be made. But now I think there's a broader question of whether the U.S. can still play the role of the guarantor of security in the region, whether we're still the superpower in the region. Now, we know that Israel has no other best friend. We know that that relationship will always be. But there is a question, I think, about the rest of your neighborhood. How is the rest of your neighborhood looking at the United States? And if we're not doing as well as we did before, maybe let's end with what, in your view, needs to change.
It's one of the most important questions that you ask me. Why? Because Israel, there's no doubt, we have only United States. We have others, of course, but we have one big ally. And I'm telling all my friends in Israel, don't make mistakes. Don't mix things together. Sometimes we don't like what the US is doing. Sometimes we don't have any other choice. This is our ally. And they like us even when they don't like us. So we have to keep this ally satisfied while it's not against our defense or security. The problem is not us. The problem is other allies of the United States. They are looking and they are losing hope that the United States can be their guarantor. Now, you can follow Emirates, Bahrain, Sudan. They are always 1 month after. They are following the Saudis usually 1 month, 2 months later, unfortunately. They are looking and they see that the United States is not delivering. The United States is saying, I want to go out from the region. I want to go to Asia. Some of the Congress people say, China first. I cannot compete Russia, China. I cannot compete 2, 3 fronts together. I'm not Israel. I'm only United States. I'm not a superpower like Israel. I'm joking, of course. They say China first, meaning I have to concentrate in Taiwan. I don't agree with it because I think United States is the policemen of the world. They have to fight or be prepared to fight in more than one front all over the world. They cannot say, we have this one, we cannot do this one. The people in the Gulf sometimes think that maybe they cannot count anymore on the United States. So what I am saying, it's time for the United States administration, and never mind if it's Biden or Trump or who is going to run to be the president of the United States, understand what are the main places, the main fronts, the main actions that the United States should do. And the most important thing is that when you promise something, you have to stand behind this, even if it's very, very difficult. And even if you have to give up other things, sometimes you have to give up that other countries will do human rights like what you want, or democracy what you want, or logic what you want. Bear in mind that not everyone in the world think the American way. But still, the United States is the only, yet, not for long, the only superpower in the world. And if they want to keep their situation or their state as the superpower, they have to understand that everyone is looking on what they are doing, and everyone is looking if they are keeping their promises. Israel don't have any choice. We are going to be with the United States no matter what. There are other places in the world that are not obliged to stay with the United States all over the way.
Okay. A lot of work for America to do in the region.
A lot of work for America.
And a lot of work for Israel.
I believe in the United States. I know that the people in the Congress and Senate, no matter if they are Democrats or Republicans or others, they know what is good for the United States. What they are doing is that what they think is good for the United States. Sometimes they are wrong, and their friends have to help them in order to tell them what is the right things to do. And I know some of those friends.
Jacob Nagel, thank you for joining us today in the studio. And for all of you listening, thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Foreign Policy. If you enjoyed the show, please rate us, preferably with 5 stars. Ratings and reviews help give us visibility and the opportunity to reach more people who seek to understand the most critical national security and foreign policy issues. Also, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Follow FDD on social media and visit our website at fdd.org. There you can find research by FDD experts, you can subscribe to all FDD's products, you can catch up on any past episodes you may have missed. Finally, we'd love your feedback, your ideas, your questions, your criticisms. Send us an email at foreignpolicy@fdd.org. Until next time, I'm Cliff May, and you've been listening to Foreign Policy.